Hi, welcome to Creative Soul Life and episode 9, Perfectly Good Enough. I've talked a lot about good enough art, creatively playing, or even just making bad art. But what about when you need it to be perfect? It's actually my mom that requested this episode. She's one of my fans. Thanks, Mom. And she said, with all of this talk of being okay with things, being good enough, she goes, what about when you need it to be perfect? But she was referencing, I've mentioned a couple of times, she has an Etsy shop. I'm actually going to put a link to it down in the show notes. And she's a seamstress and sews. And she goes, I feel like if you're selling something, it has to be perfect. What about that? Well, there is something to that. So let's talk about that. First, we need to talk about what is perfect. If you used to say Webster's defined it, but now you just Google it, and the Google Dictionary defines it as the condition, state, or quality of being free or as free as possible from all flaws or defects. So that's perfect. Now for me, the key phrase in that is as free as possible, because truly, is there anything that's perfect? And you can argue some machines, computers, different things can be perfect, but it is rare thing that can be truly perfect. So that's why I want to talk about perfectly good enough. So the biggest thing is to define what is perfect to you or perfectly good enough to you. So what's good enough? Good enough is when something is acceptable. It's worthy of stopping, sharing, whatever. A lot of good enough can be defined by why are you creating? What makes it good enough? If you're learning, you could be creating something that's good enough. You've learned how to do it. You've learned the technical skills. Not perfect, but you're learning. It's good enough. If you're experimenting, you're trying something new, you're trying a new material, you're trying to see what does this look like when it goes with this? What does this taste like when it's joined with this? You're experimenting, might be good, might be bad, might be good enough. If you're making it for you, I've brought out the fact that I sew, but I am not a seamstress. My sewing's good enough for me. There's mistakes, I take shortcuts. It's good enough. I'm okay with that. So if you're doing something for yourself, creating for yourself, cooking for yourself, writing for yourself, it might be good enough. But when do you need it to be perfectly good enough, or as close to perfect, as close to being without flaws as you can get? So the two big things is if you're sharing it, whether as part of a class, maybe you're going to get a grade or something, maybe you're giving it as a gift. Somehow you're wanting to take what you've done and share it with another person in the world, social media, something. So I think you want to take it to maybe a level above good enough at this point. And as my mom brought up, when you're trying to sell something, when you're trying to exchange this, for money as a type of good or a product, you need it to feel, you need to feel good about what you're selling out there, what you're sending out into the world. But is that perfect? So how do you know when it's as close to perfect as you can get or perfectly good enough? So first, assess the craftsmanship. No matter what you're creating, whether it be a painting or a pound cake, there's a certain level of craftsmanship going on. There's a technical expertise to what you're doing. Have you followed the steps as you know them to get there? Did you do it carefully? How is your craftsmanship? If you assess that, you feel like your craftsmanship is good and on point, does it feel done? Do you look at your end result and there's always tweaks, there's always something, but have you hit a point that you feel like, I think this is done? Do you feel proud of it? And that kind of goes with that done. That helps that done thing. I look at this, I made this. This is done. I feel good about it. That's both of those are very, very subjective. So how about you share it with somebody, either of the same type of expertise or someone close to you or someone who has some expertise in what you're doing? Can they see what you see as a mistake? Do they feel like it's done? How do they react to it? My grandmother knitted me some pillow covers one time. I never got them. Every time I would visit her and ask about them, she'd show them to me. They were beautiful. It was 2 different pillowcases, absolutely beautiful, but she kept pointing out mistakes in them. And I couldn't see the mistakes. Now, I don't know how to knit, but I'm very familiar with knitting. A lot of my family members do it. I could not see the mistakes she was talking about. And I was like, please, can I take them? They're good enough for me. And she would never let me have them because she kept seeing the mistakes. And it's kind of sad because I thought it was beautiful. So one way to assess, even though it may not be perfect in your eyes, how does it look in someone else's eyes? How does it look? Honestly, I was supposed to be the recipient of this gift and it was perfect to me. How does it look to someone else's eyes? Either the recipient of it, or if this is something professional, someone near your level. Look at it and assess it and see how they feel about it. Can they see the mistakes? Are the mistakes okay? A gallery I was a part of over in Dunedin would have art critiques twice a month. Many of the artists that attended these, first, it was some great advice, some very talented artists in the group, but a lot of times their question was, is it done? Because there are a lot of different creative practices where you can just keep going infinitely to keep doing something. But by bringing it out into the world and sharing it with others that had some expertise in it, they were able to assess, yes, it's done. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was, this could, needs some work here, needs some work there. But it helps get that fresh perspective of it, with someone who's not entrenched in that creative process, who doesn't have any emotional investment into it. They can help assess, is it done? Is it perfectly good enough? So what happens when striving for perfection is a problem? The biggest is when it actually prevents you from creating. Anne Lamott, in Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing in Life, wrote, "Perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor, the enemy of the people. It will keep you cramped and insane your whole life. It is the main obstacle between you and a shitty first draft." Now, obviously, Anne was a writer, but this applies to any sort of creative endeavor. If you're so frozen by the fear of how do I make it perfect that you're not even doing it, then there's a problem with the perfectionism. And I highly recommend you go listen to episode 8, When Being Bad is Good. Another problem striving for perfectionism can create is when you don't share what you've created. You stack it up, it stays in your studio, it stays in your journal, it stays by your sewing machine. You aren't sharing it with the world. You're so worried about being judged, or you're so worried about others seeing the mistakes, or what you see as mistakes, or you see as imperfections, that you're not sharing it. And if this is your problem, find someone you trust, find a group you trust, find a critique group, find a hobby group, or just find a relative or a friend that does something similar to what you do. Start small and share with someone you trust to help bridge that feeling that it has to be perfect before it can go out into the world. Again, I don't think true perfection is out there. I think you've got to find perfectly good enough, and reaching out to someone that you trust that can help you make that bridge, can help you get your art in the world and discover what's perfectly good enough for you. Sometimes what's blocking you is comparison. When you're looking at what you're doing, you're seeing somebody else doing it, and you're like, oh, mine's not that, it's not good enough. You're in a comparison trap. Go take a listen to episode 6 to get out of the comparison trap. Because the number one thing to remember when you're creating and you're trying to find what's your perfectly good enough is you are better than someone at what you're doing. You're better than someone. You're better than the person who's never done this before. You're better than the person who's only tried it 1 or 2 times. You're better than the person who is at the beginning of their journey, potentially the middle of their journey. As much as you go out and look and find people who you deem are better, I guarantee you, if you start looking the other direction, you'll find people who are further behind on their journey than you are. I don't want to say worse or you're better than them, because it's all a journey. You're further along this journey than someone else. So inspire them, help them, put your art out there. Even if you don't feel it's perfect, it can be perfectly good enough for the stage of the journey you're in. And again, that will be further along than some, not as far as others, but it's where you are right now. So share it. So to recap, to find your perfectly good enough, assess your workmanship. Does it feel done? Are you proud of it? If you share it with someone else, how do they feel about it? Do they feel it's done? Do they feel it's ready to be shared? And remember, don't let that fear of being perfect keep you from sharing your art, even selling your art. Know that where you are on your journey is further than some, and it'll help you get further along as well. So what's your good enough creativity? What do you do and you're okay with it not being anywhere close to perfect? And then what are you striving for to be perfectly good enough? What is it that you do that you're ready to get out there and you're putting out there? How do you decide when it's perfectly good enough? Now, go be creative and feed your soul. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and follow me, and please share some of your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you.